Sorry about that.
I thought you were infallible up until that point.
All right. Thanks, Martin. We will go ahead and convene the meeting of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We'll go ahead and start with a call to order. I'm Matt, the chair. I'm here. I apologize, folks, for not being able to be there in person with you. But thanks for all for joining. I'll do a quick roll. John Day. Nancy.
Here.
Hey, Nancy. Alexis. Jody.
Here.
Hey, Jody. And Ron.
Here.
One vacancy that maybe we'll get a chance to talk about later. Moving into our preliminary general business announcements. Do members of the committee have any announcements that they would like to make?
Yeah.
We kick that over to Councilman McCarthy. Would you have any comments you'd like to make to start us off, sir?
No, thank you.
Great.
But I am here.
Yep, thanks, sir. Martin, any public comment that you heard about?
No, Jody and I were just at the event at 4th and 66. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, I think that'd be
That'd be great.
You mean like me?
Yeah.
So there were maybe 10 people there, and it was led by, which commission is that? Because I might want to get on that someday.
Inclusion and adaptive living.
Inclusion and adaptive living, and we had people with different disabilities as well as a spare wheelchair, and it was assessing how it felt to cross each leg of the intersection. And
Great.
it was certainly, it gave an eye-opening perspective for the people, both from their the length of time it took to cross, the difficulties popping wheelchair wheels over what you might think are small obstructions in the road where the concrete is pushed up a little bit or whatever. Especially the people blowing through when they're doing the right turn on red, coming into the crosswalk or turning across. What all else was there? Many of the people saying they didn't feel safe doing that alone on a normal basis, and that it was much more helpful having the crowd of us going. Trying to think about some of the other, there are feelings about what would make the intersection safer. So I think an island was mentioned by one person, being able to have a place of refuge, that the times weren't long enough. Kind of split opinion about if a tunnel or a totally separated thing could help, but then the disadvantages of that as well, or the safety disadvantages. We had a very obvious example afterward, just wrapping up, a woman crossing with a 2-child stroller, where it appeared that she was having to avoid a car nearly turning onto her at least once, and then a second time, and we kind of asked her how she felt about the intersection after she got across, and she was very expressive in her displeasure with crossing that intersection and very vocal about not feeling like it was safe, even though she was kind of like a poster child for, here's a person with a 2-kid stroller, how can you not give that woman some room? And it sounded like she did it on a regular basis and felt like it was a very unpleasant experience each time. Did I cover much of it, Martin?
That was really good. Yeah, I think you got it.
Are you logged in yet?
Yeah.
Cover.
I could talk some more if you need some more.
Martin, one question there. Are all the folks on the call city employees or stuff like that? Do we have any members of the public that you know of?
Does not look like it. We do have Councilmember McCarthy, Lieutenant Turley, and Elaine from ADOT.
Okay, great. Well, moving on to our approval of minutes. We have quite a series of minutes apparently for approval. Our combined meeting with the Bicycle Advisory Committee on September 14th, and then our regular meetings from July, June, and April 13th. And
so we are, Mr. Chair, we are making progress. We have half of those minutes done. We're still trying to get caught up on from before. So I've got a couple of them done, but there's still a couple more. So we'll have them for next time.
Okay, good, because I didn't see any attachments, so I'm not the only one who didn't read them. Great. Moving on to old business. Martin Butler, 4th roadway project, update on the alternatives and the presentation to the city council.
Is it okay? Do you want me to switch screens? Those in the room? It's easier. Is that okay? Okay. So just a couple of things about the intersection. You'll recall that we had a combined meeting with the Bike Advisory Committee back in September, and a presentation was made about the Butler 4th roadway project. At the time, you were asked to rank 4 different alternatives. So I think we were one of the first groups to go through that exercise. The team went through a couple other commissions and boards of the city and wound up at council on Tuesday, November 7th, so just a couple days ago, and kind of made a very similar presentation. The information that they gave council was not available at the time that they presented to the combined BAC-PAC committees. And essentially, they had come up with a different alternative for a roundabout, which you see shown here on the screen. We're calling it alternative D since we had A, B, and C before. I'll just point out a few of the highlights of this one. The old version C of a roundabout had 2 through lanes on each leg, plus right turn slip lanes on each leg. So really 3 legs total on each turning movement or through movement. This one's significantly cuts down on the number of legs. So you can see, like coming in on the eastbound side, there's 2 legs. 1 leg going out, 2 coming in westbound, 2 going out, and then no more than 4 legs entering. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4 entering and exiting. Here's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So significantly reduced number of legs. It still has the same features in terms of crossing. In other words, it will be a protected roundabout for bikes and peds, so they'll have their own separate channels to use. So there's a pedestrian crossing and a bike crossing. I will caution us not to look at too many details in this drawing. This is pretty conceptual. So where these crossings end up and how they're configured might change a little bit. So I wanted to, and I should mention that after the presentation and discussion and questions by council, they gave staff direction to move forward with that alternative.
I think the best to me.
So I wanted to show it to you just kind of as an update to what's going on. And also if you have any thoughts or comments at this point, understanding that we need to go through some of the specific design elements to get to the final answer.
Well, I know when we reviewed it, I remember thinking, I wish we had another alternative. And I looked at the numbers for this one and it did improve, I believe, pedestrian and bicycle. The safety numbers went up, I believe.
Yeah.
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 So it's just sort of nudged it in that direction. So yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Sure. Could I make a comment?
Yes, please.
And this is a comment I made Tuesday. You know, we were among the alternatives we looked at were what was called a 6x6 and a 7x7 configuration of a regular traffic light type situation. And the point I made, and which was previously made 5 minutes ago in this meeting, at those kind of intersections like 4th and Route 66, a pedestrian might have to walk across like 6 lanes. Well, what I like about this design is that there's refuges in between. So a person could walk across, if we look at the lower left corner, 1 lane, stop in that refuge, and then wait for the next one and only have to go across 1 more lane, another refuge, and then go across 2 lanes. So at a given time, a pedestrian would only have to go across 2 lanes as opposed to like 5 or 6. And then so I like that. And the other suggestion I made, and I don't know how seriously staff took it, but I'll make it again, is these refuges need to be as wide as possible. They can't be like 2 feet wide. They have to be wide enough that a person could stand there and wait for the next lane to clear and not feel threatened by, it needs to be a 3 or 4 feet, 5 feet ideally. The other point I made is that for pedestrian, there needs to be a sign that says there's 2 lanes here. Be careful. And I gave the example of an accident that happened in Tucson when I was a kid, where this girl that lived right across the street from me was going across Broadway, and a car stopped for her and she walked out. But the next lane, the car didn't stop and hit her and killed her. She's dead. So there needs to be a sign that warns people that, if there's 2 lanes they have to cross, be really careful. If someone stops for you, make sure that both lanes stop for you. And if I remember correctly, this design has warning lights where a pedestrian can push a button and it'll tell oncoming traffic to please yield to the pedestrians. And the other thing we talked about is that maybe there should be a tunnel underneath this intersection. And, no direction on it, but at least have staff take a look at it, because there's going to be a drainage tunnel under there anyway. So it might be fairly easy to add a pedestrian bicycle tunnel. And of course, it's always easier to say it than it is to actually do it. So, but we did ask staff to look into that. So those are my only comments. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Councilmember McCarthy. Any other comments from the council or committee?
I don't think
Jody.
I mentioned well enough. There was a guy from over towards the mall area of Flagstaff who mentioned during our meeting this afternoon just how nice it was when they put in the 2 tunnels there, and how it totally changed his comfort level of being able to go from a stressful environment to just feeling like he could go all the way, connect to Route 66, because there's the two tunnels there. So it was a nice experience for him. Those were done well.
That's a great example. Thank you. Martin, did you have anything else on that, or was that was the update?
Yeah, I did include a little bit on the community survey results that I wanted to share just as kind of context or background. So we did, in conjunction with the open house, we opened up a community survey. We had 179 responses. We asked people to tell us what their priorities were for the project. And here you can see a summary of the results. People were asked to score different features or components on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is very important and 1 was not at all important. And so we took those results and averaged the score and then kind of put them in rank order. Number 1 was safety, then ped and bike, followed by environment and equity. And then you can see the rest of the results as you go down. Aesthetics always loses out these things.
Yeah.
We do need beauty as well as bread. A couple other results. We asked people to put them in rank order. And I know that, there tends to be a lot of vocal comments about roundabouts, but actually almost half of the people who responded to this question picked the roundabout option, even the one with all the right slip lanes, all the channelized right turns as their number 1 option over a 6x6. So there is some, I think people are getting more used to roundabouts, and there's not universal objection to them. There's some support for them.
I was wondering also how many people, just 2x2, and even though it's a roundabout, then they look at 6x6 and 7x7, and those numbers just seem big and overwhelming, and they're like,
Yeah.
Oh, two must be better than 6 or 7. I like your
you might be
idea
onto
better,
something.
Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like yours better, but I'm just wondering, the cynic in me, if people just think that way.
It is interesting that they do the numbering system kind of differently.
Yeah, completely different.
So here's one more in our wheelhouse. We ask people to do the same rank of importance of 1 to 5 on different ped and bike facilities. The one that scored the highest was separated bike lanes, protected intersection, or roundabout concept, ped flashing beacons, raised crosswalk, tunnel, and mid-block crossings. They all scored fairly well, above 3 at least. And then finally, we are going to a different kind of arrangement for bike lanes. So we'd like to ask people just to make sure that they're comfortable with that. And in line with other surveys that we've done, there's pretty strong support for the separated bike lane concept. So that was just a bit of context on the survey. I wanted to share those results with you because they're relevant, I think, not only to this project, but other roadway projects as we move forward to see where people are.
Really enjoyed the comments.
Can I make one more comment?
For you.
Yes. Yeah, please, sir.
A quick comment or a question really for Martin. The slip lanes, it would seem the slip lanes would actually move cars better with really, the pedestrians would only have to go across one lane at a time there. So what is the disadvantage to, or the advantage, pluses and minuses to slip lanes? And I'm interested if the other committee members have thoughts about slip lanes or no slip lanes.
Yeah, just quickly, the slip lane or the channelized right turn lane does add an additional lane to cross, even though you're only crossing one lane at a time and only dealing with traffic from one direction. It's still another lane to cross. I think generally there's a concern about how they're designed and if they slow traffic down or not. If they don't slow traffic down, and there's variations in design and how these things function. But if vehicles are allowed to kind of keep their speed, then I think it makes pedestrians a whole lot more nervous and potentially puts them at more risk than if it's a design that requires vehicles to slow down or puts the crossing in a location where a vehicle is more likely, a driver is more likely to see them and yield to them. So I think that's primarily the concern, but I'll throw it to the committee for additional comments.
I think, Martin, you nailed it. I think it's not slowing down traffic enough. And so then the cars are still going too fast, and then they're only looking left to see if a car is coming, and they're not looking right to see if a pedestrian is coming from the opposite direction. So that's always a problem with every right turn, but it's especially a problem if we make it too easy for those right turns to happen at 30 miles an hour or more.
Yeah, and I had that happen to me as a driver looking for pedestrians, and there was a pedestrian in the crosswalk. My passenger alerted me, hey, there's somebody there. So you get that sense of, this is my lane, I don't have to worry about everything. And sometimes you ignore, you don't realize there's going to be a pedestrian.
I mean, though, Ron, how telling is it that people like us are here talking about how sometimes it's hard to look out for
Right.
pedestrians, right?
Yeah,
Like,
you're trying to do the right thing. You
obviously,
think,
yeah, we're here
if
putting in the
us,
time.
if not us, then what about everybody else?
Exactly.
I wonder if you put a stop
Yeah.
light on the right turn lane and, actually put a red light and tell them
See,
that they
that
have
would-
to stop for pedestrians. If that would mitigate the problems. Just a thought. I'm just thinking out,
Yeah.
out loud.
Yeah.
Because
in
I
that
know
case-
this is all going to come back.
I think raised crosswalks would help in that situation as well, Jim.
Mhm.
That was one part of the conversation that I didn't love with the engineers was kind of, they made it just seem like raised crosswalks are this redundancy that should be discounted without even, they're like, oh no, the roundabout will slow people down enough. And then it's like, well, why would we not also make sure of that with an actual physical thing? That was, but I'm glad that at least beacons are advancing so far.
Well, if this committee thinks that we should have raised crosswalks, which I think is a good idea, I think you should make that recommendation to council. And I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just saying, if you want to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
Sure, I capture that. Okay. Are you guys generally comfortable with the roundabout concept versus a conventional signalized intersection?
The concept or like comfortable walking around them?
I think isn't that the same thing?
I understand the
One on
concept.
paper, one in real life.
Yes, I just mean, I'm not that thrilled with, negotiating them on foot, on bike.
On the
Yep.
cover.
I know what you're talking about, though.
Okay, Mr. Chair, that's all I had in that item.
Great. I just want to make sure I gave you time to finish up those notes for us.
I appreciate that.
Great. Moving on to new business, much anticipated talk about mode share data and trends report.
Yes, so a little bit of background on this. We originally collected this information and put it in a report as kind of a background or a working paper for the active transportation master plan.
Mhm.
We've updated it recently and we'll continue to update it because it's part of what we're going to use for evaluation for tracking implementation or the results of how we're doing with the ATMP. And specifically, there's a handful of outcomes, indicators, and targets listed in the ATMP that I'll show you a slide in a bit that we use mode share to track. And to take one step backwards, just to define terminology, so we're not using jargon. Mode share is simply how people, different modes that people use to travel. So the typical ones are driving, walking, biking, and transit. Things like driving can be divided into single occupancy vehicles or multiple occupancy vehicles. The second one being more like carpooling. And we use it as kind of a measure of how healthy walking and biking is and how many trips we're diverting from vehicles. We use two primary data sources. One is the American Community Survey, part of the census. They provide information to us every year. So we can update it every year. The second one is Metro Plan's Trip Diary Survey. That's more in depth. It covers all trips versus just the work commute, but it's only done every 6 years. As it happens, it was last done in 2018, so it's due again to be done in 2024. And I know they're planning to do it next year as well. And that gives us a lot of good information about how people travel around. We dove deeper into the American Community Survey and managed to pull information on different populations. So we have mode share by gender, race, poverty, and disability status. I'll show you what those numbers produced. So I mentioned that ATMP has a series of outcomes and indicators. They're listed here. The outcomes are in bold. One of the outcomes that we are hoping for or planning for is that walking and biking are frequently used transportation options. And that's indicated by mode share and mode share for work trips. So that mode share is from the Trip Diary Survey. Mode share for work trips is from the American Community Survey. And then the second one is walking and biking are enjoyed by everyone in the community. And here's where we use the information on mode share by different populations. So we can tell if the benefits of walking and biking are being enjoyed by everybody in the community or if there are equity issues. Here are the targets. And we only have a handful of targets in the ATMP. The difference between targets and outcomes or indicators is that targets have a very specific numeric target by a certain date. So the two for mode share are we want to essentially double mode share for walking, biking, and transit from now to 2042 or 20 years from now. So for all trips, we go from 27% to 54%. And for the work trip, from 17 to 34%. Pretty ambitious. What we're essentially saying is by in 20 years that more than half of all trips will be made by walking, biking, or transit. So you all have your work cut out for you. But to know if we're getting close to those targets and if we're achieving those outcomes, we have to measure mode share. Here, this is information that we've measured over time, and this is provided by the American Community Survey. This is 5-year data, so each one of these data points is a 5-year rolling average. So for example, 2021 represents 5 years, so 2017 through 2021 going back. So the data tends to be a little bit more stable. It doesn't bounce around as much, but it uses some older data versus the 1-year data, which is more current, but it tends to bounce around more because there's more variation from year to year. So just looking at this, red is transit, blue is biking, and green is walking. And again, this is just the people's commute to work. So since 2009, you can see kind of the trends. Walking was increasing over that time, but since 2019 has begun to decrease. Bicycling has been kind of steadily declining for the work commute trip, and transit looks like it went up and then kind of went back down and has been stable for a couple of years. So some of these things I think, bear some of our attention, and we really haven't in earnest begun implementing some of the things in the ATMP or building sidewalks or things like that. But I think over the next couple of years, we'll have to watch to see if these trends go the other direction. I think the other interesting thing that we could look at if we're able to collect the data is to look at, is this similar to our peer communities or to statewide or nationwide averages? Like what's walking and biking doing more generally? Is this a Flagstaff phenomenon?
Because it seems like it's going up. That would be my sense, is that it's going up.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is that if Flagstaff's population is going up, the percentage of people who walk and bike going down, the number of people who walk and bike might still be going up.
That's good.
So we do collect some information compared to our peers, and I apologize, this is really kind of tough to see. But there are 18 or 20 communities that we consider our peers, and this gives us an opportunity to measure ourselves against them. You can see we're in orange. So walking, we do pretty well. Biking, a little bit below average. Transit, just a little bit below average. Yeah,
Snow would seem to be a factor. I know it is for me. Or cold. I drove my truck tonight. It's too cold.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting part because we didn't consider weather in the peer communities, but I know some of them like Las Cruces or St. George don't have the same winters that we have. Places like Missoula might be more comparable.
Yeah, that's pretty.
At the last Bike Advisory Committee meeting, they had a short discussion on the difference between Flagstaff and Missoula. And a woman who was on the committee who used to live in Missoula, so that we're the same town, except that Missoula is flatter. Are the winters comparable?
They are. I mean, it's a valley up there, so they have an inversion. So that doesn't really necessarily affect riding and walking, but it can be brutal there. Smoke in the summer and inversion fog in the winter. But I think it is actually a pretty good comparison for here. And it is very flat in town, that's for sure. But they've got a real river.
Yeah.
Well, Davis is good.
With trout.
Flat.
She also pointed out that our bus system is called Mountain Line and Missoula's bus system is called Mountain Line.
I mean, how many Mountain Line bus systems are there in America, though? There's probably quite a few.
Yeah, so here's the last piece of information I'll share. And this shows mode share for different populations. And we'll start in the upper left-hand corner with gender. And you can see that women are slightly more likely to walk, bike, or take transit to work. You can see if you look at green is walking, blue is biking, and red is transit. So if you break down where those numbers come from, actually fewer women bike, but many more walk to work. And I don't necessarily think that's surprising. Like you think about, who the biking population is. Moving over to the upper right, this is by race. So we break it down into non-white and white. And the non-white population is slightly less likely to walk, bike, or take transit, although it's fairly close. And you can see again, non-white population is less likely to bike to work than the white population. So I think, aside from being interesting, this information, I think, gives us a little bit of direction about like where we might take our efforts. Going down to the lower left, this is poverty status. So people who are below poverty status are much more likely to walk, bike, or take transit. And then you look at the individual numbers, a big component of that is walking. Anyone surprised by those results?
No. No,
Yeah.
That'd be higher.
it's cheaper.
I mean, I think, looking at that, I think it's anecdotally, or if we're telling a story, I think we might talk about that, but like having the hard data, I think this is for Coconino County, but, having this data locally and having information that actually tells us that's happening, to me, like just makes it more real.
I actually thought it was the reverse until learning it on this committee. I thought for years that it was a rich person's luxury to be able to walk or bike to work.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize just how,
It's like a necessity.
yeah. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's at both ends, isn't it? Like there's a segment of the population that doesn't have other good options other than to walk by.
Yeah.
Like for some people, taking transit is even prohibitively expensive. And then the other end, like there's a segment of the population that are transit riders or walkers or bikers by choice
Right.
who have that.
Leave the
I
car.
would choose it no
Yeah.
matter what their
Yeah.
circumstances are. So I think it is very nice having the data.
And then the last one on the lower right is disability status. And here again, people in Coconino County who have a disability are much more likely to walk, bike, or take transit. And you look at the individual components, and each one of them is higher with a disability than without. So walking is higher, biking is higher, and transit is higher. And that's all I had for that information. I think we'll continue to update that report, probably not annually, but maybe every other year. If MetroPlan does their trip diary survey, we'll have a whole ton of new information to include and address in here.
You'll like that. Lots of statistics to do.
Charts, yeah.
The numbers keep going down. Maybe that's. The one thing when I was in Southern California, the employers had incentive programs. They had to for air pollution. They wanted to reduce vehicle trips because of the air pollution impacts. But where I worked, they subsidized riding in a van pool substantially to where it was very attractive. So I know there's not that option here, but if you could get some of the employers to maybe, encourage their employees to walk, bike, carpool, anything, they would have to do it out of the kindness of their own heart. But still, if
When I
they've
was-
got some climate pledge as part of their operating, goals.
When I worked at FMC, they had you could go to HR and get free
Yeah.
bus passes.
It was great,
I
yeah.
think at AU, used to have the Eco Pass for anybody working. I don't know if they still do that or not, but that was a really nice thing to just be able to walk up to the bus anytime and flash your pass. And
Yeah,
And they may have those, I'm not sure, but I know many corporations have some commitment to, make a positive impact on global climate change. And maybe it's
I
a
think
it's a
it
cheap,
could be an initiative that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what prompted the hospital to do that, but it sure was welcome.
It's a nice
And-
thing, yeah,
yeah.
and it encourages good behavior and it's a wellness component as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In theory, a lot of federal employees had that, but it was always fairly burdensome and difficult, at least when I tried doing it. It was kind of, you had to really like paperwork to do
Yeah,
it.
it's funny you say that, Jody, because I was thinking when I lived and worked in Portland, and obviously Portland's a little bit different, but like everybody, either your transit was paid for, or you get like $100 a year to fix your bike up and get, new
Yeah.
tires and stuff like that. And it was, yeah, of course, we made it hard on the paperwork. But I was just thinking, it's interesting in my 5 years here, nobody has asked me for that here. And it's
Yeah.
just a Forest Service wide federal government thing. And nobody here has ever asked me for any of those things. It never occurred to me until you just brought it up right there.
You could be a leader.
Yeah. But I mean, it also gets back to the both ends of the spectrum as you're talking about, because I specifically bought a house walking distance to my office,
Yeah.
because I had that luxury, because I was able to do that. And so it's like, yeah, people who can't afford to do anything else, and then people like me who specifically made financial decisions so that I could do that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Well, Mark, thanks for going through that. That was really great, and I'm looking forward to it being updated and continuing to take a look at it. And like Ron said, hopefully though it doesn't go down. That would be depressing. But I mean, if it is,
Maybe
then,
e-bikes, I'm
we've got
thinking
more-
maybe
we've
the
more
e-bike,
work.
Incentives.
yeah, or just
well,
e-bikes
yeah.
are become so prevalent.
Yeah.
That more people are just gonna use that sort of a car. I know several people personally who've done that.
Especially in a hilly town like ours.
Yes. I know, I have to. go
There's some
way down.
daunting hills between my
Yeah.
house and.
Also windy.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed is the dip in walking, biking and transit also seemed to occur over COVID.
Yeah.
So I don't know, a lot of us were required to stay home and work from home for a while. So I don't know if that had anything to do with your stats.
Yeah, just anecdotally, when we were collecting this information, the trip diary survey just asks about trips that you make. So it doesn't necessarily capture if you're working from home. But the census data is really like, how are you getting to work? And so one of the options is you work from home.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And we looked through the data, there was definitely a spike in working from home over the pandemic. Now, for future versions of this, we might include that as one of the data points to see like how does that trend continue? Are people still working from home, or does that percentage stay high, or does it go back down? And what does that affect? Does that cause a reduction? If more people are working from home, is it fewer people are driving?
Less vehicles, hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, or does it mean fewer people are walking, biking, and
Yeah.
taking transit?
Taking out the.
Yeah, or is it a little bit from each?
Because I think what it taught us is that a lot more employers, they've invited people to come back to the workplace, but a lot of employers have embraced kind of hybrid work situations. So your transit data may be affected by the phenomenon of
Right.
being allowed to work from.
And from a climate action perspective, is it a success regardless of how you get the cars off the road?
Yeah.
Whether
would
you're
think it
staying
would,
at home
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I know some other destination towns have counted, Matthew, you probably know more about this for the mountain towns in the West. If people work in the town, but they're teleworking, it can be considered not a benefit to the community because you need your firefighters, you need your grocery store workers. And so finding ways to sort of disincentive teleworkers from coming in and taking up all the housing in the beautiful town when there's nobody to actually do the local work. I don't know if we've reached that stage yet here in Flagstaff, but it was an interesting kind of first I was thinking, oh, telework, great, and then realized what the downstream effects are for the rest of the community.
Yeah.
I read an article about in the pandemic, because of that phenomenon, like in Lake Tahoe, if you had a spare broom closet, you could rent it for $2,000 a month.
Go there.
Yeah.
Go skiing and work, yeah.
One more thing before we leave this, all the incentives that you guys were talking about that employers provide, is part of a programs called travel demand management. Generally, and Metro Plan is hiring a person to manage a TDM program for our region. So one of the things that they might do, for example, is work with employers on offering those, like what kind of incentives can you offer to get people to walk, bike, or transit? In Ron's case, if you're in a non-attainment area for air
Yeah.
quality, like those things are no longer optional, like you
Yeah.
have to do those things.
I had a boss who wanted to just buy out of the program. He said, what's the fine if we don't? I said, you're missing the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
Okay. Great, thanks, everybody. Martin, moving on to our next item of new business, pedestrian and bike project capital and grants planning.
Yeah, this slide's a bit empty, but I just wanted to kind of kick this off, introduce it
Does
to
that mean
you.
we get to fill it in, Martin? And pick all of our
Yes,
favorite
yeah, this is
projects
all.
and send them to the council? And
That seems legitimate to me. So every year the city goes through a process to update its capital plan. It's a 5-year duration, so we identify projects over the next 5 years for funding. And then what's identified in year 1 becomes part of the budget, so we actually have money for it. And then years 2 through 5 are kind of our plan, what we want to do. So it makes us think to the future and what we want to do over time. We update it every year. We're just beginning that process now. So we will bring back information about what was in the
We have a
plan last year. Yeah, if there's any other changes. The one thing that we'll add to this year's discussion is we'll get more into identifying projects that we think might make good grant applications. And there's a pretty good handful of them. Just to kind of plan for that as grant opportunities come available. And that's all I had for that one, Mr. Chair.
thanks. Sorry, I started cheating and looking at the ATMP online planning map while I was sitting here.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Moving on to the pedestrian and bicyclists Bill of Rights.
Okay, this is another blank slide, and here I truly wanted to hear what you guys think. So I included 2 pieces of information. One was a Bill of Rights that was drafted by Susan Heffley on the Bike Advisory Committee. And the second was links to a presentation that the Commission on Inclusion and Adaptive Living did to Council a number of weeks ago, along with some information that they provided. And I think there's a lot of overlap between those 2 things, and that they kind of address operations and maintenance and how we're treating the facilities that we have, more so than talking about where we're missing things or building new things. And I just wanted to kind of throw open the discussion to the committee to get your thoughts and comments about those pieces of information, these issues and concerns in general. And if you have any ideas about how we might move this forward. I mean, sometimes these problems or issues seem a little bit difficult to manage, but I'm sure that there's a way that we can think about them differently, come up with suggestions, do the little things, see what other communities do. So I'll throw it to you just to hear your thoughts and comments.
I just have a comment about the Bill of Rights, is that a lot of this is really aimed at maintaining.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if the city has the personnel and facilities to do this to the satisfaction of the author of the Bill of Rights. Like, I'm just throwing it out there. Like abrupt and uneven surfaces that can burst tires will be beveled. I mean, Wow.
Although seeing the woman struggle to get into the street with her wheelchair today, I was definitely feeling like I wouldn't do it for a bike, but the bike will benefit if we do it for the wheelchair person.
Right.
And so we had to see the technique for popping the front wheel, and her caregiver had to help her pop the front wheel. And the guy who was trying to do it himself for the first time, there was a person who did not need a wheelchair trying it out just to see what it was like. So uh, in some ways, it's sort of like for ecosystems, you have a species that you're trying to protect, but by protecting it, you actually protect a whole, it creates an umbrella effect for all users or for all other critters in the ecosystem. That might be a little too broad.
Well, I
Sorry,
think-
that's where I go.
I think it's kind of brings up another point is where is the priority of this right applied?
Yeah.
And definitely sidewalks or crossing streets should be, that speaks to safety.
Hierarchy.
There should be a hierarchy because, I mean, all over my neighborhood, there's abrupt and uneven surfaces and
Yeah.
it's not nearly as important as that Fourth Street and 66
Right, right.
crosswalk, so a lot of these are awesome ideas. I think they're awesome, but it really puts it puts a heavy burden on city maintenance personnel and equipment and facilities.
I would, where are you, go ahead.
So I think these ideas are really nice, but I just input would be maybe we need to refine some of them a little bit. Because what is the accountability to these Bill of Rights by the city?
Well, my thoughts were, yeah, aren't there mechanisms or plans already in place that sort of address these? Or didn't we talk about maintenance in the ATMP? I remember, because that was one of my pet peeves is we come up with a great plan and then people don't do what the plan says.
What are the barriers to this, I guess?
Well, it's,
They're
it's
huge.
making it a priority if resources are available, but then it's also how are people, I know when I worked, I knew what my priorities were and I knew
Right.
how I was evaluated and
Yeah,
so, and I've called in as far as specific defects out in the community.
sure.
I've called stuff in to the city and they go out and fix it. So, I would hope that if there's some areas within this Bill of Rights that aren't covered by existing mechanisms, maybe we need to refine those mechanisms. But that there should be something, including this committee, where there's mechanisms to talk about specific, master plans or current issues with snow removal or whatever it is. It seems like this is sort of on top of that.
Yes.
And I don't disagree with any of it.
And our Ryan could probably speak to this. Police will ticket vehicles that hit or threaten cyclists or pedestrians, blah, blah, blah. Are there what are there laws on the books that cover these type of things? And is it realistic to tell police instead of a warning or whatever? It takes away their discretion, I guess.
Yeah,
To-
thank you guys. Yes, there's laws against hitting people
Yeah.
in the books, and we can't really demand citations.
Yeah.
There are some case laws. There's times when we do citations like clicker ticket time or school zones when school gets back in session and stuff like that. I guess I don't know where would be the accountability if an officer pulled over somebody that gave them a warning. What if they're violating a Bill of Rights? Is that going to be? I guess. Yeah. What's the punishment or punitive of it? And that's probably not the message we want to send to city employees.
Right. Right.
On that. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, there is laws in the books.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of agreeing with you about demanding that an officer provide a citation each time. Because I've seen situations where bicyclists are, and or pedestrians are truly acting not riding or walking in crosswalks or dart across lanes of traffic. And if they're hit, it's certainly not the driver's fault.
Does that specify whenever driver negligence is involved
There you go.
on the thing? I mean,
Okay.
that's what it includes that in there. I
Okay.
think there was some frustration with the thought that the person who hit the cyclists on Lake Mary Road might just get a simple ticket. My coworker and my neighbor were in that group, and that was a pretty traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And so it just feels like we keep on, there's sort of a lengthy set of stories if you talk to anyone for people who have been hit or nearly hit, where it sounds like the driver didn't mean to do it. And so therefore, because it wasn't intentional, it's not actually treated as seriously. And it can be, it's hard to know. Everything's always a hard trade-off, but it certainly can be frustrating and makes it feel unsafe. But I agree, it's, there's the nobility of the set of things, and then what does it actually mean to put it into action?
Right.
And what accountability, what other things, how does it compare to our goal of getting? I think if we don't meet these, our goal of meeting 54% mode share, that it really does take raising the bar really high to get there.
Mhm.
Any other comments on the Bill of Rights?
Just a couple thoughts. It feels like a lot of the things that are in the Bill of Rights are items that are covered in like a complete streets policy, for example, but they're sort of worded differently. In other words, that it's the same thoughts, but they're worded as it is a policy of the city to treat all road users equitably in terms of planning, accommodation, maintenance, operations, all those kind of things. So it kind of addresses those same thoughts without being formulated as a Bill of Rights. And so, of course, the trick is once you have that policy in place, then it really becomes what are you doing to implement that policy or to follow through on that policy. Some things are easier than others in that regard. All of them take some work. Like we just can't say the words and then have it
Right.
become the case. I think the issue of what are the staff resources is a legitimate one. For example, if you look through the presentation that the commission made, there's a lot of information about enforcement. Like what are the mechanisms we have for reporting violations? And how are those enforced? And the reality is like with snow removal, for example, if everyone reported all the violations, the city would be overwhelmed. Like we can't possibly do that enforcement. I do tend to think that the question of is, do we have enough resources? It's kind of a combination of things. That one, we probably need more resources devoted to this to make it work, to maintenance of bike and ped facilities, for example. I think that it would partially help if our priorities were different. So I think it's fair to look at what our priorities are, what we're taking care of now, and if there's a different balance that we could achieve between, like plowing streets and plowing sidewalks or bike lanes or foot trails. So it might be a little bit of both. I can tell you that maybe this is still a thing left over from the pandemic, but the city's staffing resources are, I mean, we're kind of in trouble. I mean, we have a lot of vacancies. It's hard to hire people at Public Works, for example, who have commercial driver's licenses, who can operate snow plows and other pieces of equipment. So it's definitely a challenge overall, more so than it was 5 years ago. And that clearly has an impact on what the city's able to do. And I don't know if there's a short-term or long-term way out of that, or if this is going to become kind of an ongoing issue. A lot of these things are in the ATMP, but again, those are nice words, but what we do with them is really what
The
matters.
structure is there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
seems like another layer of structure that be redundant.
And I think we can work on these issues one way or another if.
Yeah, we even as a committee, we
Yeah.
could say, look, we want to take, a vote and say, send a message to whoever that this needs to happen or stop happening or.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up, Martin. Appreciate it. Next item is Foot's trailhead maps.
So we are in the process of swapping out the maps that are installed on these signs. They're located in a handful of places around the Foot system. We recently put in 2 new ones that don't have any maps at all yet until we do the new ones. We're thinking of changing the layout a little bit, and I wanted just to get your feedback on the direction that we're going. So this is a draft of the map that we want to include, and the slide after that has kind of a poor image of the map that we have in there now. The most significant difference, other than this one being more up to date, is that we would like to just focus on the foot trails on this map and take off all the other kind of bikeways just to make it a little bit more readable.
Yep.
EAC have a couple of questions about that because it's good information, like if you're traveling between trails and have to use the street system. But there is a QR code down here that will download the full map for you if you want to see where the version of the
Okay.
paper one that
Okay.
shows all the bike routes and bike lanes and so on. So you'd still be able to use that, but at the trailhead itself, you would just see where you
It's a
are
lot cleaner.
and where the trails
Yeah.
are.
I like that. I think that's a good move.
Yeah, no, I agree. The other one is great information, but it's super busy. And then I
Yeah.
would wind up spending my whole time like, wait, what's blue?
Well,
Wait, what's orange? And just looking at the legend constantly and trying to remember, right, piece together. So no, this one looks way better to me.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
May I make a comment, Chair?
Yes, please. Feel free.
Martin, some of our foot trails, we allow electric motorbikes, and there's 2 trails that we do not allow electric motorbikes. Will that be on the signs?
I think we can add that. Yes.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thank you.
It's hard to see in this map, but there's a distinction. There's a dash line where it's an unpaved trail and a solid line for a paved trail. I think we can add some indication to show where e-bikes are not allowed, and then include some text on the map as well.
I also like this one because it shows how comprehensive the foot system is.
Yeah.
Like, and then when that's all it is, like, I mean, yeah, downtown, you're gonna piece it together on some roads, and the base map's there to show you that. But like, it shows you how far you can get on this trail system. So I really like this one.
So one more question. We do periodically get feedback that it would be nice to have more of these signs. And I think that would be a great idea. Do you guys have any ideas of where other locations? We tried to put it where where people are likely to get on the trails, or where there's kind of an intersection of a number of trails, kind of hearts of activity. They're not inexpensive, the signs.
Look.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't think right off the bat.
The confluence of the bus stops on, and Gemini, I feel like, and the pedestrian overpass there, I'm not sure if there's the direction that people would go to get to Buffalo Park, because I feel like I often have people asking me, directions around areas around Buffalo Park and anyone within a half a mile of there. But I'm trying to think, because it's the main intersection there is the one of the bridge going over the road. The pedestrian bridge, with the east-west route. But then there's the two bus stops that are nearby where if you're going to take transit to get to Buffalo Park,
That's a good idea.
I don't know where the best location would be.
Yeah, probably not halfway in between the two.
I know, that's the problem, is I don't know where.
Usually, yeah, where you show up, like, okay.
Although I guess actually the bus shelters are probably have pretty good maps in them showing that kind of stuff already that link up transit to our trails.
I think they typically do.
E to T.
I don't know that they.
We have one at
all
Fort
do.
Cuddill. I'm sure we do, right?
But definitely the bus stop up on the top by the
Yeah.
bridge. Be a great place.
Okay, we'll continue to work on that. Do you want to move on to reports?
Yes, please. I was trying to drop, I think, Councilman McCarthy, that should be the link to that last map or to that main map, but I dropped in the chat.
Well, I guess my main point is we're not using the whole screen. We have that, file, home, insert, draw, and all that stuff. And the little mini things on the left, where normally at meetings we expand it. There you go.
There you go. You got it.
My
Gotcha.
bad.
Oh, here we go.
Yes, Martin, moving on to reports, please.
Okay, so first item, I wanted to give you kind of a little bit of overview of what's going on in different safety studies, because there are at least 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe more swirling around out there. So the first one is we presented some information to you a couple months ago on ped bike crash data. And the city's subsequently done a report on vehicle crash data. So we just have that information. Metro Plan is wrapping up what they call a regional transportation safety plan. So they have looked at crash data in the region, determined 8 different emphasis areas, and are coming up with projects and strategies to address those 8 areas. And I think I can't quote all of them, but I think they're generally things like collisions with animals, which tends to be high in this area, weather-related crashes, nighttime ped and bike crashes, impairment. I think there's a few other ones that kind of came off. It's important because it's helpful in us determining a capital program, and also there may be grant funding available for safety-related projects. The second one is related to that. It's also Metro Plan. They received a federal grant from Safe Streets for All to do a specific safety plan for vulnerable road users. So it'll be more specific than the one above it. And they have promised that they're going to address equity as one of the issues in crashes. So of course, vulnerable users are generally peds and bikes. The last one is at the ADOT levels. This is statewide. They recently started what they call a vulnerable road users assessment. So they're collecting bike and ped crash data statewide. Fortunately, we are not one of the focus areas that had a lot of ped bike crashes. So
That's good.
in the past we have been, so maybe we're improving. Once they do that assessment, that will lead to a statewide bike ped safety action plan, and that will be rolled up into their statewide transportation safety plan, which is similar to the regional one, but at a statewide level. And again, this kind of outlines projects, strategies,
Right.
Priorities, becomes a basis for funding.
Yeah.
So we as a staff stay engaged in these different processes, and I'll make sure that you guys are, if there's anything good information to pass along, or public meetings or things like that, or surveys to take or whatever there is that you guys know about it. Otherwise, I may just keep it on reports as things come up, just to let you know how those things are progressing. More reports. First Mile, Last Mile is a federal grant that the city and Mountain Line are working on. It is for ped and bike projects within proximity to transit. We recently completed a 5% kind of assessment of all the projects, cut a few out and are moving on to 60% design. That includes specific studies for places where we have crossings planned. And then look at what improvements we need, like is it a simple island with crosswalk markings, or is it a beacon, with push button and flashing lights? So when we do the capital planning stuff at the next meeting, I'll have a map for you that shows you where these projects are and what's being taken care of through that grant. Kind of the next item is about grants as well. This is about Butler Avenue from Milton to Sawmill.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
Well, hopefully I can answer your questions. So one of the requests from council is that we evaluate lower speed limits along that corridor. So that is in process right now. I don't think we have a council date or a date that we have planned to go back to council, maybe after December. But that's being worked on. We submitted a grant to the state for protected intersections at Beaver and San Francisco along Butler. I believe that the State Transportation Board is going to make the final decision a week from tomorrow on those grants, but we're recommended for design money, like $400,000 for those intersections. So presumably if the State Transportation Board agrees with that recommendation, we'll have that grant. We also submitted a Safe Streets for All grant for the whole corridor. And I think we talked about this before, but that would move the bike lanes from the street up on top of the curb.
That's the one I was wondering about.
Yeah, that's $12 million, and we should find out in mid-December if we have that grant.
That's a federal grant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a federal grant, yeah. Any questions, comments, or should I
Sounds
fall
good.
forward?
Free money.
Free money.
Yeah,
It's never quite free,
but
but
still, it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
coming out of the city budget.
Right, we don't have 12 million for this
Yeah.
project, so.
That's great,
that
Martin.
last- That last bullet point is about Lake Mary Road. Really from, say, JWP all the way out to Mormon Lake. And there's a group that has convened to talk about things that might be done to improve safety for people who bike and jog along that corridor. And there's a lot of people that do both.
Yeah, those speed runners train out there at the mailboxes. Yeah.
Yes.
They
People who,
pass me when I'm riding my bike.
people who will be in the next Olympics.
Yeah, they're very fast. Yeah, they're very good.
So this was really in response to the crash between the group of bicyclists and the motorhome. And it's being kind of led at this point by Flag Biking, and the county's involved.
Yeah,
So
it's
we've
like a
had,
county road out there. Yeah.
yeah, part of it out to the campgrounds is city.
Yeah, after 5 miles, it switches.
Yeah, then it switches to county.
The road's not as nice once you get to county.
So and the sheriff's office is engaged as well as part of that. So some of the things they're talking about are there changes to striping or improvements to the road that can be made to help safety? Are there designations to it, like as a safety corridor, as a recreation corridor that would raise awareness of people who use it for recreation? Can the sheriff's office do ticketing of speeders? Everything's on the table at this point. We haven't really limited what options might be. It is kind of a unique corridor when you think about it, because a lot of like really elite
I've ridden
athletes
a lot, yeah. And
train there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we'll participate in that process, and as things happen or things come up, we'll report back out. So you're kind of in the loop. Fremont Boulevard, this is a lane reduction from 4 to 2. We're working on some striping plans. I included a link to the results of the neighborhood survey.
Striping is in process.
First part of it, yeah, but just at the very front part by Fala, yeah. I will mention that, it looks like we've applied for an asphalt art grant. And it looks, our chances of getting it are looking good. I think we have some preliminary indication that it may happen. So it's Metro Plan, Fala, Creative Flag, and the city's beautification and public arts that would be engaged in and how that might work. And then those things often make really good neighborhood projects. Like you get kids out there to do the paint. It's so much cheaper when you use child labor than.
I really love the utility boxes. You're starting to see a lot of those around town.
Yeah, that
Those
makes
are
a big
great,
difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
Cosmic Ray Tunnel mural is done. There's a link to the article in the Daily Sun. If you're interested, it's really cool. I think
Yeah,
it
I've
turned
read
out
it.
well.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Big improvement.
And the group of Cosmic Ray supporters who kind of put all this together was talking about an informal gathering next Friday, a week from tomorrow. I'll find out if that's still happening and I'll send you the information if you're interested in. I think the artist will be there. And, yeah. And I think, because that tunnel was really built for sheep herding, and sheep herding in this part of the country is directly linked to the Basque history in this part of the country. And the mural has Ray on one end and then sheep on the other end. And the sheep herders in like traditional, Basque sheep herder dress. And there was an article picked up in like a Basque newspaper.
I can see it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's like, look at this. And then finally, and we might have reported this already, but the Buffalo Park improvements are complete. And there's a nice article in the paper about
Yes,
that.
they're really nice.
Last couple of things. The transportation section where I work has undergone a reorganization. We have a new job approved for a transportation planner. The job description is done and we're just waiting to get it all through HR.
That's great.
Um,
That'll get those numbers where we want them.
yeah,
It's not gonna hurt.
it's not gonna hurt. So that's working its way through the system. And then the final one is PAC appointments and reappointments. And we have 1 vacancy and 4 applications. And I sent you those applications just to have you take a look at them. As you know, we are a subcommittee of the Transportation Commission. So unlike other commissions, our members are appointed by Transportation Commission rather than by City Council. That gives us a little bit of leeway in how we think about, or the process that we use for evaluating those applications. Now, honestly, in the past for PAC, there hasn't been so many applications compared to vacancies that we've had to worry much about this. Usually if somebody's willing to serve, they get to serve. Now we have one vacancy and 4 applications, so we can think about if there's information that we want to collect, we want to ask people about different things. And of course, the Transportation Commission gets to make the ultimate decision, but is there a way to provide them with information about the applications? And then finally, there's one expiration in July. That's Jonathan. He took a very short term, so even though he's pretty new to the committee, he was filling a term that expired in July of this year. I'll get with him. If he wants to reapply, he's eligible for another appointment. So we can go back if you want to have any discussion about, getting applications and reviewing them and finding out more information about people or how they think about walking.
I read through them. They were all
I
pretty
do
good.
too.
I have a personal favorite, which I won't mention just because he seemed like he had a cool job.
I think if we're my only input is, to maybe look at the demographics of who's on the committee
Right.
and look for somebody who's not represented by age,
Mhm.
race.
Since we do have that luxury.
Yeah,
Parents, we have a hard time keeping the current parents of small kids or
Yeah.
of kids still living at home or whatever.
Yeah. That's actually, Jody, that's what stuck out to me about one of them where they said parent to 2 teens. And I was like, that's something that we don't have really great representation of.
What different neighborhoods like to try to get geographic
That's good,
diversity?
yeah.
that's a good idea. But yeah, just if I were to throw out an opinion, look for some demographic that is not currently represented.
Okay. I will admit, over the years, to the extent that we're able to kind of tinker with the composition of the committees and diversity, maybe I've talked about this before, I apologize, but just making sure that there's kind of gender balance on committees, and really the pedestrian committee has never been an issue. Bike advisory committee could be an issue. Like it could go all male if we are kind of careful about how we
How does it work
Yeah,
with
that's a
going
point.
back to a committee if you've been on it before and are like, what's the, how many years do you have to be out of office? I think I expired out of the bike one, and I definitely feel like I'm considering stepping down early from this one because if you've got 4 applicants now, and my time's up in July. Anyway, but I just was curious, how does it work for returning to a different, actually, the Disability Commission seems also like a good and interesting one. Well, and I'd ask you about that later after the meeting.
Okay, I think if you went to a different one, I think that like you could go, there's no time limit, like if you wanted to go to inclusion adaptive living. If you stepped off of this one, and I'm not sure how long you would have to wait before you could be reappointed, if there is any guidance.
See how things go, but I might ask you more about that. I'd hate to lose if we have 4 good applicants. Catch them while they're interested. It's boring winter months before they get busy.
Okay.
That's all I had for reports. Our next meeting is December 14th. I mentioned that we'll talk about capital projects and grants and get into a little bit more detail. We are also working through some revisions to the engineering standards. After the adoption of the active transportation master plan, we went back and looked through the engineering standards to make sure that everything in there was kind of in compliance with what we're talking about in the ATMP. And we're starting to do a couple of revisions to make our standards more compatible with an emphasis on bike and ped. There's a couple levels of revisions. Some are really simple to do. Those are the ones we're working on now. Some are more complicated, and we're trying to line up our, work over the next couple of years to begin to tackle those.
Give it to the new person.
Yeah, a new person. I'll give you an example. Like one of the easy ones is we ask that manholes, and there's probably a better term for that now, but I don't know what it is.
Portals to the underworld.
Portals to the underworld. And water valves be located outside of sidewalks or foot trails when possible, because they can be done flush, but sometimes they can,
Yeah.
cause, they can settle or whatever.
They're slippery,
Or cause
too,
cracks, so they can
when
be
they get
slippery,
wet.
yeah. So that's a simple one. Like rethinking our street standards is gonna take a little bit more time.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of the agenda. So we'll go ahead and adjourn for this evening and look forward to seeing everybody next month.
Okay.
Thanks all. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you all.